Let me try and give you a picture that should be picturesque and perhaps would be telling, having to do with what I was talking about again last time we were taping, of the way in which life works through man. I've talked about it in all sorts of ways, but try this picture. Imagine a huge rubber glove with many fingers, and it's filled with some kind of, let's call it growth goo. And from somewhere, the original premise, like the Big Bang, but from somewhere unknown, it's around the spherical curve for a more complex, an additional dimensioned reality, part of our reality, is pushing on this creative goo, this expansive growth goo, and in one of the fingers, right at the end, is a little hole, and that is man's intellect. And it's this pushing going on. But there is only one place, as far as our visible, known universe is, the 3D world, that there is such a hole. Now this picture, I can condition it and apologize for it and say that it's not perfect, but by God it's close. It's a better picture than you've ever had before. It's better than seeing Jesus or Moses or Elvis on black velvet. There's some kind of trees, they're branching out into some kind of metaphysical areas that lead nowhere. This leads somewhere. And inside of that picture, let me also point out, that was the initial point, but the picture even lends itself a little bit further. Down in the other, let's say the glove, the palm part of the rubber glove, you could see, if this existed the way I'm describing, you could see little rising lumps and shifts around. And I bring this up because of what I was mentioning again. I refer to myself, our meeting last time we were taping, that man can apparently be aiding to a certain degree in the creation, but it's in an invisible realm. It's in the intellectual realm. I was pointing out that men cannot create elements. They can rearrange it. But now at that real direct physical level, I also wanted to point out this kind of moving around, let us say, imagine this great glove swollen up, and down in here, where it was swollen up, you could see lumps arise and fall and shift around. For instance, the earth itself, through the subterranean volcanic action, bubbling up in oceans and on land masses and producing what seems to be new land. But now you know, all you got to know is a little bit about geology. It's not new land. It didn't just come from somewhere. It is just part of the molten, the bubbling, continuing, growing process of the planet Earth. And so what appears to be out in the Atlantic or somewhere, that there is a undersea volcanic eruption, and then after a period of days enough comes out and it cools, and there's an island where there was none. But it is not new created land. And so this kind of activity, and of course same thing and further out in the universe away from us, and the birth and the death of stars evidently, even the birth and death is, the human intellect wants to suspect now, of even whole galaxies, solar systems. But it is not in the sense of man's intellect, it is not in the sense that some of the creative, expansive goo is actually coming out anew. I don't know whether to encourage you to consider this real subtle or just real crude, because it's all conditional. But I just want you to see that the only thing that comes close to being truly new is what man can do here. That is, what life does through its own body, through its own life, and it comes out here. The hole in the one finger in the rubber glove. And it's invisible. That is the key right now for tonight. In the 3D world, it is invisible. Everything else that man apparently creates, art, painting, sculpture, technology, everything that man does is secondary, and everything that he does that is visible, no matter how attractive, no matter how useful, there is a difference between that and what he can apparently do here. That is where he comes close. That is where he comes close in the Michelangeloian picture that I confiscated last time of the great figure of the creative force, of the God, and then of Adam, that the energy can almost flow back and forth. But it is always in the invisible realm. But life is pushing its own creative process in a way that you cannot see anywhere else. At first, for some allegorical or metaphorical reason, you might come up, or I could have even done it, and used the production of new land through the geological forces. I could have used that as some kind of metaphorical springboard some night and pointed out that that is sort of like producing your own new land masses inside of your brain, now that I think about it. So I could have said that that was comparable. Or I could use the apparent birth, development of stars and other solar systems as a kind of burgeoning new galaxy inside of your own brain. But there is a difference between that which is visible, because it is in fact a rearrangement of elements. It is not really creation. It is not really new. It is different. It is different combinations. But it is not really creative. And I will grant you, those of you who are getting sharp enough, that there are limits to this, but in the 3D world, this comes the closest. Anything else is not close. It is simply rearrangement. No matter how attractive, no matter how captivating it may be, it is rearrangement of already known elements, structures, systems. This, apparently, can come up with brand new things. That is, through that one pinhole and that one finger, life is continuing to grow. Life is not continuing to grow on this planet. Nothing else. Life is not producing new animals. Life is not taking hippopotamuses and making them suddenly start looking around to try to find a bar that they begin to take up ballet. You do not see possums beginning to try and scratch out mathematical formulas in the dirt. You do not see trees beginning to show signs of wanting to walk from one place to another. And out in the solar system, it is a mechanical process that is simply a repetition of itself. Even in the birth of stars, what humanity has had the occasion now over several hundred years to try and observe it, that even that is simply a replication of what has already happened. It is only here. Look back over human history. Humans have thought things today, last decade, that no human had ever thought 50 years ago, much less 2,000 years ago. Never thought. Just never thought it. Nobody ever thought 2,000 years ago about, well, how will we control the different gravitational field on the moon when we get there? Nobody ever thought that, literally. Nobody ever thought that. Eventually, what people think along gradual lines becomes a reflection of something approaching new. Not rearrangement, but new. Throughout the history of man, life has had certain systems and institutions, primarily religion, encouraging man to ask himself a question. If the institution didn't apparently ask it, but they encouraged a man to ask it. And the question is, usually along these lines, this is what it amounts to, is what will you do with your life? Now, they've been asking that. People have been confronting that even outside the general recognized realms of religious systems. But it would seem to be a serious question. It is historically ancient. It has been presented in quite respectable contexts. But what should the question be to a real revolutionist? Not what will you do with your life. It's much more specific. It's what will you do with your intelligence. That's it. Because if indeed you could separate the two, which I will attempt to sketch out, even though their reality is somewhat in conflict as always, in a sense, the question that life is oozing out through the normal institutions into the normal intellect as humanity is at any given generation, the question as to what will I do with my life is moot. It's a part of the churning process. It's a part of the growth process, because an ordinary person is going to do with their life what they do with their life, or conversely. A person is going to do with their life what their life does to them. A person is going to do with their life as their life lives. A person is going to do with their life as it rolls. That's it. It is a different question to say, what are you going to do with your intelligence? There, for a few people, there is a small chance of some exploration. But as to what are you going to do with your life, with most of you, I surely don't have to try and make some sermon out of this, but you people getting us on tape at some other time in some other place, you need to face up to the fact, not pessimistically, not theoretically, that any sort of large change, being magnanimous about the question, if sort of large change with an individual is kind of whistling in the wind. It's kind of illusionary. Sort of doesn't happen. So the question of what, let us say that somebody hears this question and they do take it seriously, that yes, I've even thought that, but now that you put in those words, you're right. And almost every day now, since I actually heard it under those contexts, I think to myself, all right, what will I do with my life? Now, if somebody can think that for the next 60 years, you can say, well, what did it amount to? Well, nothing. I never came to any conclusion. I was still working on it when there was a knock at the door and they said, your farm's been sold. And it was too late. The question of what will I do with my life, of course, is really churning up this in people. Insofar as someone changing their life, that is, of saying, God, what a question. Maybe they receive it in the context of under the right conditions, and they're wired up in such a way that some big kind of religious ritual and some great priest or someone says, the only important thing that a person can ask themselves is, what will I do with my life? And let us say this individual goes, oh my God, that's it. And so they work on it. They think about it. You do understand that it's, generally speaking, it's not going to have any effect upon their actions. That is, upon their life. They may talk about it a lot. They may have it tattooed on the back of their hand. They may write a book about it. But what will I do with my life as far as that actually affecting their actions? It may apparently have some effect on thinking of their actions. But then it will be just as mechanical as it could be if indeed they could apparently affect their life, their behavior. The only possibility, you don't have to believe that, a possibility, I shouldn't give you such a premise, even casually speaking, a possibility with a few people would be to confront the question more specifically into what is actually individually possible, is what will I do with my intelligence? Because you're not going to change what you are. You can lose some weight, you can put on some muscles, you can get a nose job, you can get a hair transplant, but down at the primary level, simply, you should know that there's no real change possible. You're not going to make your heart any stronger. If you're born with weak lungs, there's not much you can do about it. If you're born with poor hearing, there's not much you can do other than get a hearing aid. The point is that when you get down to the primary level, when you get down to any level by any notation below the high end of the nervous system, the human intellect, when you get below that, questions about what will I do with my life, let's say what you're saying is, what will I do with myself? What will I do with all of my lower systems, all of my nonverbal systems? And there's really nothing to do. At that level, if you were born shy, you're going to die shy. If you were born aggressive, you're going to die aggressive. If you were born a loser, you're going to die a loser. That's it. I'm being fast because tonight's a fast night. The possibility is where the hole is in the finger of the glove. Is what will I do with my intelligence? Because there, and only there, is there already, in a greater, on a wider scale, is already new creativity, new energies coming out through humanity as a whole. Now, insofar as to whether one person, an individual here or there, can get in touch with that, align themselves with that, grasp onto that, get in the right place, become aware of it, is the question. That is what would turn into the question of, well, what will I do with my intelligence? The rest of it, you know I'm not saying not to get exercise, and if you need to lose weight, do it. If you need to put on weight, do it, etc. If you need to go to a doctor, if you need to wear a hearing aid, do it. If you need glasses, wear glasses, etc. But do not get confused with that, well, I am what I am, with my intelligence is what it is, and there's nothing to be done about it. If that be true, then life is not even growing. And all of you should know by now, even if I dropped dead or said, well, come on, I'm just going to admit to you I made up everything I ever told you. I just made it up. Which I still don't know why that would, even the possibility of upsetting anybody. I don't know where the hell you think it came from. But at any rate, if I said, look, I made it all up, and now I realize it's all wrong. It's just all wrong, all the stuff I made up. At least you should say, okay, it could be, except for this one thing. You did accidentally tell us correctly that I do see without any doubt, regardless of you. I do see that life is not dying. Life is growing. In general. Whether I'm dying or not, whether he's dying or not, it's another question. Whether there seems to even be a living example of involution. Maybe, but that's one example. Humanity is growing. That is just a given. That is just beyond obvious. The only way that that's of any practical value, that knowledge, that awareness, is then to ask the question of yourself, what will I do with my intelligence? Not what will I do with my life, what will I do with my soul, what will I do with my spirit, what will I do with my talents, what will I do with my love, what will I do with my hate? None of that. It has got to be right at the high end of your own nervous system, which I am representing, would be the high end of humanity's nervous system, would be that little hole, that little pinprick hole in that one finger of this large rubber glove, and everywhere else it just swells up, retracts, moves around from finger to finger, rearranges itself. But this one place, the glove continues to, as it were, to grow. That there is an outlet, and the outlet is the human nervous system at this end, not anywhere else. It's not a matter of humans, as I pointed out, growing 2 or 3 more eyes, even their eyesight getting better, their hearing getting better, growing 2 or 3 more fingers. If anything, they'd be losing fingers. There's less and less to do manually. It is not that. It is this, and only this, that is growing. That is the outlet. You could look upon man's intellect as being like life's great sower, S-O-W-E-R. I don't know whether it's any other kind of sower, whether it's part of the Garment Workers Union, but what I mean is S-O-W-E-R. What you have the intellect doing is operating at unrecognized, multiple, parallel, conflicting, supporting lines of energy dispersion. Such as some of the things I have mentioned under slightly altered context in the last several weeks. The Western Church not only spread religion, in the 15th and 16th century particularly, they not only spread religion, they spread commerce. That which seemed to be, that you just state, anybody say, all right, whether you agree or not, what is the purpose of a religion, of the church? To spread religion. But that was not all they spread. They also spread conflict, hatred, wars. Not only spread death and destruction from ordinary view, but they spread technology. Because every time there's a war, the winner always, immediately, without going through all the trouble that the vanquished went through to develop new technology, whether it be gunpowder in the 14th century or whether it be rockets after World War II, the winners take a nice quantum leap forward, technologically speaking, by simply absorbing whatever happened. So the war not only spread, wars always spread blood and guts and destruction, but it also spreads progress. Critics, they not only spread the critic that takes on Sal Manella's, the critic not only spreads the name and the talent and the work of the artist, the critic also spreads himself. Now specifically, when I was saying you look at the intellect as being a kind of sword for life, but operating in unrecognized, multiple, parallel, conflicting, supporting manners of energy distribution, in the same way that I was pointing out, I think should have been clear enough that religion, the church not only can spread religion, but commerce. That wars can not only spread destruction, but growth. That critics can not only spread the name of an artist, but they spread themselves, their own names. And you can go on and on with that, but now, this is also true with human thought, with ideas. All ideas, no matter what it is, carries with it some combination of the following, for instance, and I could call them other things, but also that any idea, it may seem simple. It may seem simple, like for every action is an opposite reaction. What goes up must come down, and fuck you. Every idea carries with it some combination of other ideas which are multiples of that, conflicts of that, supporters of that, the original idea, parallel with that, are literally irrelevant. And it always goes with the idea, any idea. There cannot be a simple movement of energy. There cannot be a simple action of any kind, such as an institution, the church, says, let's go spread religion. And they all get together, all the popes and all the cardinals and all the junior popes, and they go, all right, we'll do it. We'll go over here and spread it in a place it's never been, and that's all we're going to do. And they all cut their little fingers and make a blood oath and do their fingers and do whatever Boy Scouts do, that's all we'll do. And they can do their damnedest. But that is not all they'll spread. It's impossible. You surely see that. No matter how hard they tried, if they can agree, all right, the only thing we'll talk about is religion. That's all. We won't talk about anything else. Just them moving, just them going from wherever they started over to Constantinople, over to Bombay. Wherever they go, they cannot do the singular task that they think that they have undertaken. When you move energy, you cannot move some simple energy. You cannot move A out of AC current. You cannot move C out of DC current. Now, the more fully depictive representation I've used, that all energy is tripartite, C, D, and E, as I was calling it for a long time, you cannot move simply C energy or D. Ideas. I want to say if I had established that with any sort of ordinary people with routine intelligence, they might go, yeah. And if I said, but that's true with human ideas, then they go either no, or I don't know what you mean. And then they might say, well, even if it's true, it's irrelevant. I don't see the purpose in it. Well, the purpose of it is that it gives you a whole new concept of the way the brain ordinarily works. When you realize that here, think right quick of all the good church folks trying to move religion, but at the same time they moved marketplaces. They moved new monetary systems. They moved commerce. For you to try to move an idea from one neural spot to another, all right, that's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to think about that. I mean, somebody just asked me, do I want to do so-and-so? Or somebody just asked me, my girlfriend just said, do you love me? All right, it's just simple yes or no, but let me think. because I want to be truthful. And so you think, well, it's just going to be a direct movement of energy. It's the church moving religion. War. What's the purpose of war? Country A declares war on country B. What's the purpose? It's to destroy, at least the armies of country B. Rain down destruction until they submit. That is the purpose. But that's not all that happens. When there seems to be a purpose and somebody says, that's all I want, and if they believe that, which all of humanity does, then they are living, as that great Texas philosopher Charles Brown said, in a fool's paradise. You cannot move simply that, whatever that is. Every time you think something, that is, every time life thinks something, every time your brain says, hey, whatever it seems to say, it also says, without you knowing it. The energy says. It doesn't say it in words, of course, and it has nothing to do with the psychological, unconscious, or subconscious. We're talking about substrata below the verbal level of energy, because all energy does not talk. Volcanoes do not talk. Dogs do not talk. Your stomach, when it rumbles, is not talking, even though people say your stomach's talking. Only this talks. But other energy is going on, because volcanoes are movements of energy. A dog barking, looking at you, looking away from you, is energy moving. Your stomach is energy, but it is not intellectual energy. But it is going along with it, in the same way that if a man is trying to make a speech, or you're trying to profess your love to somebody and you've got a stomach ache, it's going to influence the ideas that you're trying to convey. But they are at a non-verbal level, and it's not psychological. It is simply a conveyance of energy that is below the level that is necessary to create speech. It is in your nervous system. It is in life's nervous system. So you have energy of a sort that has a name. It has clothes on it, it has flesh on it, and it says, I love you. Or it says, may I help you? May I convert you to my religion? Whatever it is, it says that. But along with that idea is also going some combination, there can be all of them, is going conflicting energy, that is, conflicting information, supportive information, irrelevant information. I always say that to last because the first two's bad enough. But note that the reality of this does continue to peep forward all the way from Aristotle's time up until contemporary psychology in the belief of the unconsciousness of man, or subconscious mind at operation. That people can do things according to psychology. All of you know this, but I'll point out, it's just a crude reflection of this reality at a more basic electrical, chemical, molecular level, that humans, according to psychology, can without a doubt say something and mean something else. That is, the salesman can say, yes, trust me, this will last 100 years, when he knows it won't. Or that people under certain conditions say, well, yeah, I love you, when they don't. And sometimes they don't even know it, says psychology. All that is a reflection. Of course, they think that something is amiss there. They think it is something to be cured, to be treated, if it can be reached and touched. But what's going on is what I'm telling you is that just as with the church, religions, economics, cultures, wars, criticism, in the human mind, in that end of the human nervous system, when an idea is moved, it carries with it conflicting, supportive, and irrelevant ideas. But that is not what is necessary for an individual nervous system, that is, intellect, to be aware of. Of course, they're aware of the consequences. That is, that nobody's ever satisfied with what happened. Nobody's normally not satisfied with what they say. All right, yeah, I do love you. And a little later, the other person's still bugging you. Go, well, God damn it, I said I love you. Will you leave me alone? And you leave and you think, what the hell? It took a lot out of me to tell a woman I loved her, and now she keeps saying, are you sure? Are you sure? People can make, humans can apparently make a quite direct, unconditional statement that, all right, this is the way I feel. I'm going to tell you what I think on this matter. Bloom. And you're still not satisfied. And I'm telling you why. Because there is no such thing as bloom. There's not supposed to be. But if you don't know that, you always think, well, there's supposed to be. So how come I can't really say what I mean? Well, you can. Yeah, but how come I'm never satisfied? Because you're not supposed to be. That is the satisfaction of life. No, you're just trying to play with my mind. No, I don't play with children. I could be accused in your case of child abuse. As life grows through man's intelligence, through that hole in the finger of the glove, an individual normally thinks of the ideas that I'm saying is the one potential of creativity of humans. They think that all ideas are either, I can think of two orders I was going to give you. The first order could be, for me to be more specific with I was going to say ideas, all ideas, but it would really be either the first order would be SMM, some, much, most. The second order with some humans would be that the ideas that humans have would be SMA, some, most, all, slice between those three. Ideas that humans have are inconclusive, confusing, unsatisfying. For instance, you remember the one I pointed out that publicly the visible success of systems are dependent upon their systematic lack of completion, which is a more specific way that I used some months back. I told you that a system's public success is dependent upon its continual failure. For instance, the example I used once was the institution of diet plans, diet books. That every time I look at the New York list in the last few years of the top 20 books, it's like a third of them are diet books, week in and week out. Why do they continue to sell? Why do they continue to be written, published, sell? Why is it part of the human system? Because they do not meet completion. Instead of me just saying I'm going to try to be a little more specific, to get you to see a little more specifically, rather than me just saying that the public side of systems that succeed, that is continue to operate, such as the sale of diet books, is dependent upon their failure. This is more specific. This is getting closer. The visible success of a system is based upon its systematic lack of completion. Trust me for a second. This is a more enriched version of failure. That is, humanity in general, that segment of life's body called humans inside the human race, that feel the need, that are driven to think about, I would like to have a new diet plan. And they're most readily available in a diet book. I will buy a new diet book. If there was a diet book, if there were some diet books, that this segment would read, and it suddenly made them, within a reasonable promised length of time, that they lost weight just like they wanted, and it went away and it didn't come back like a boomerang. You would not have week after week diet books written, published, and on the bestseller list. That is, if a diet plan reached completion, did what a diet plan says it does, there would only be 1 or 2 books ever been written, and no one else would ever buy one. The publishers might, for each generation, continue to republish this 1 or 2, but there would not be a continuing string every week of new diet books. Religion cannot guarantee what it talks about. Psychology cannot apparently cure that which it attempts to treat. It won't even promise. So why does it continue to be popular when no psychologist worthy of the name psychologist or psychiatrist would tell you, yes, I guarantee, you come to me, he gives you an initial interview, looks you over, you tell him a general problem, he says, all right, I guarantee I've helped people like you before. And his guarantee is just as good, I'll assume, as Chrysler's is for 50,000 miles on a new DeSoto if they still made them. God, I hate since they left it so. A psychiatrist, a psychologist is not going to tell you that. A priest cannot guarantee. But let's say a psychiatrist seems to be more down to earth. Why would people continue to go there when they say, well, you know, we can't promise? Well, how many people have you treated during your career? Maybe the man says, well, and he checks back and he says, 17,420. And how many of them, as far as you're concerned, were cured? And he might say, well, look, now we don't use the term cured. And this potential patient says, well, look, I'm an automobile mechanic, and I have to guarantee things that for at least for 3,000 miles when I replace a carburetor or when I do a ring job, and you're not going to give me a guarantee? And the psychiatrist, no. Does that put them out of business? No. It's part of a system. But it cannot reach completion. That which would appear to be the visible completion of its systematic purpose. Now, outside what would seem to be these institutions, these larger areas of operation, each individual, not using my terms of course, looks upon in a very suspicious manner, without being able to analyze it verbally, all ideas, not just from the institutions of religion or psychiatry, but individual ideas, including their own. They look at them as being very suspect because some of them, remember the first order is SMM, either some of them, much of them, or most of them end up being inconclusive. They do not satisfy, they're just inconclusive. If they were not, human thought would not be as popular as diet books. Human thought would be like the little hole, and it would begin to grow over. And yet the human intellect tells itself, well, wait a minute, the ideas I've had, forget other people's ideas for a minute. I'm a thinker myself. I've always tried to read important books and think, but I'm going to tell you the truth, he says to himself. What I've thought thus far, and I've thought some weird things, but what I've thought this far still doesn't satisfy me, so something is wrong. Your thoughts are on your own bestseller list. Your thoughts are continuing to write these diet books, and your one thought grabs the diet book and goes, wow, this is just what I wanted. It pays the money, runs home, reads it, maybe even tries it, but at least reads it and goes, God, what a great idea. Except 2 months later, it was like, literally speaking, a Chinese meal. You suddenly want another diet book. But the other one didn't work. Well, I don't know. It might, maybe if I'd stuck with it, would have worked. It seems to be inconclusive, unsatisfying. To use this, you've got to have a continuing recognition that all ordinary thought carrying with it its own normally unnoted, supportive, conflicting, and irrelevant ideas, energies, is, by its very unrecognized definition, or by its own nature, is going to be inconclusive. We don't really have time to go off too far in this direction, but it strikes me, I can give you the heading of some night's meeting of the Shrug Society again, is I could say, tonight's sermon could be headed Success and Failure versus Completion and Expansion. Because ordinary thought tells itself, and people tell each other, but it tells itself that everything I've thought, everything I've heard that everybody else thinks, didn't quite get it. It's like you can stuff yourself, and yet you always think, well, it feels like food's all the way up my esophagus here, and yet I'm still hungry. I bet if I had gone ahead and started like I wanted to with that half gallon of heavenly hash instead of, or if I had gone ahead and got a pizza there between that meal and this other one, it's always that it is inconclusive, that what I am thinking, what I just thought, what I read that somebody else thought, something's lacking. I don't know. It's just some little something is lacking. New intelligence would see this condition, I must point out, as being no less than a continuing sign of the health of life, its continuing expansion through man's intellect, and as far as you can see, only through man's intellect, not in other parts of the solar system, not in the birth of new stars, not in the production of new land masses through geological operations, through man's intellect. But the very thing that seems to be inconclusive and unsatisfying about the operations of the human intellect is the absolute signs of its health. It cannot be otherwise. We got to turn the tape over. All of you who like to write down such as this or remember it, I was going to give you a little expansion, but you can, I suggest, use this as a further map. The verbal expansion I gave of the old one about systems surviving and being publicly successful because of their failure. That is, that religions cannot actually make people what they say they are, or they'd be out of business. Prisons cannot actually redeem men, rehabilitate them, because they did, they'd be out of business. Doctors cannot actually cure illness, or they'd be out of business. Psychiatry cannot cure, etc. Diet books do not make everybody who is interested lose weight and keep the weight off, or else there'd be no diet books. But what I gave you is a more detailed verbal direction. I was going to repeat one more time, and I was going to add some further elaborations. But it is, if you want to look at it as one of these non-law laws, it is the visible success of a system is based upon its systematic lack of completion. Because failure is a most crude, success and failure is a most crude example of old world intelligence. The binary concepts. They're suitable enough back in the old court of Ferdinand and Isabella, but it won't get you anywhere. A more enriched way to describe it is a systematic lack of completion, that the job never seems to get done. It can apparently in an individual case get closer to being completed, that you do find people that you see them, they say, boy, can you tell I've lost 30 pounds? You go, yeah, I hadn't seen you in a year or so. How'd you do it? I bought Dr. So-and-so's book, did exactly what he said, went off and stayed off. I know that happens. But there is a systematic lack of completion, that is what appears to be the visible attempt, the visible purpose of a book, a system, a religion, systematically will never reach completion. That everyone involved will not get the apparent promise, the reward. They will not visibly, apparently succeed by their own definition. The thing's continued visible success, which you can look at as being its continued existence, is based upon its systematic lack of completion. Not just failure, but its systematic lack of completion. A sub-law to that, a Friday sub-law. All visible failures may be more complex successes. Friday's sub-law to that. Life doesn't fail. A small sidestep of the kind of expansion that is continually going on, even when it appears to be in conflict or appears to be irrelevant, such as the church spreading commerce, trade, opening up new markets, when its apparent purpose, its only stated purpose, was to spread religion, or for a critic to be spreading not just the name of that which he's criticizing, not just the show, not just the painter, the artist, musician, but he spreads himself. He spreads discontent. Diet books do not spread the loss of weight. They may here and there, but systematically they do not. But consider, let me go back to that. I want you to see if there's any doubt that it's not just the immediate examples. I can say when I say that even ideas are carrying with them unrecognized, conflicting ideas, supporting ideas, and irrelevant ideas. But not just what would appear to be the immediate neighborhood. Consider the diet book scenario. You've got to see. It's strange. It sounds simple. But every now and then I do give some thought to people at other times and other places seeing these tapes that I'm sure somebody somewhere will be at someday seeing this will be the first time they ever saw this. And for me to say that diet books continue to be successful because they fail, there's probably people going to be seeing this tape for the first time and they're still back there and they hadn't thought anything, they hadn't heard anything since then, on the basis of how curious, how stupid, how frightening, how enlightening, except it's like their own little computer keeps turning on, off, on, off. Wow. The success of it is based upon its inability to reach a systematic completion. Put crudely, it cannot succeed. Psychiatry cannot begin to succeed. Nothing can begin to succeed at its public apparent level. Critics, I was going to use a diet book, I want you to see outside the immediate neighborhood. A diet book comes out, let me tie some of them together. A diet plan, a diet book, the whole scene of diet books. They spread their own critics. You surely know that. Almost every time now there's so many diet books, every time they have a new diet doctor in his new book on some talk show, within 2 or 3 days, if not the same show, they'll also have another doctor who'll say, I've read this book, or somebody from some nutrition clinic, and they say, I've read this book. They let the doctor give his spiel for his book, and hold it up and wave it. And then I say, well, here's somebody with a conflicting opinion. This guy said, I've studied that book, we've gone through it, and I'm going to tell you what, it's a danger. I'm not going to say it wouldn't work. I'm not going to say somebody might not lose weight, but you could kill yourself. So now we have a criticism of the book. Now, another doctor that seems to be irrelevant to this, he's sitting there watching that some night, and he sees 2 or 3 shows, and this guy keeps popping up, and they turn out that this doctor with the book, that his book is now #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, and it's selling for $19.95 a copy, and he finds out that most authors are getting like 10%, and he finds out things then sold $1 million. And so a doctor somewhere has never even thought about diets. The guy's a podiatrist. He decides I'm better looking than this cat, this other doctor, and I can talk better than he can publicly. I'm going to write myself a diet book. And he does. So the diet book spreads, produces critics, produces new diet books. It encourages, and I'm going to slip away from the immediate neighborhood, it encourages publishers who's never published diet books. They begin to see their diet books everywhere. And maybe the editor of this particular publication for years has been laughing, because all they do is scholarly works. And finally he realizes scholarly works don't sell worth squat, and most of the New York Times bestseller list are taken up with diet books, and he begins to kind of fish around. Do we have any doctors around here who might be interested in writing a diet book? We might be interested in publishing it. It then begins to spread to the food processing industry. Food processors then begin to realize, listen, if the biggest sellers in the country, year in and year out, for the last couple of years, are diet books, why don't we start making our peanut butter, our ice cream that says, good for diets? So it begins to affect them. And then people keep trying to lose weight and it goes up and down. It begins to affect the clothing trade. They have to begin to take into consideration the up and down, the yo-yoing, the losing of weight, even those that do succeed, that the demographics, when they normally put out women's dresses, they put out so many in size 7, so many, all different sizes, that now as the interest continues to grow and grow and grow over people losing weight, they have to change the demographics of what percentage of their dresses each year are size 7, size 8, or whatever it is. Do you understand? And all of this came from something that from a visible level is not succeeding. From a certain appropriate level, these diet books don't work. Or else you couldn't keep producing. These publishers wouldn't keep putting them out. People wouldn't keep writing them because they obviously don't work, or the people who want to lose weight wouldn't keep buying one after the other, after the other, after the other. But it ends up into areas that if you went into Kraft and you talked to them about their ice cream division, and they started pointing out that you start asking about their ice cream sales and how's it going now, this light ice cream, ice milk, and reintroduced ice milk, or whatever you're calling it, light ice cream, low calorie ice cream, how's it going? They go, wow, in the last 6 months it has gone from 10% of our gross sales of ice cream products to 65%. And if you tried to talk to them like, well, do you understand this whole diet craze, the books don't work? You think, what do I care? Because he is now experiencing what they would call success over something from another view is failing. So do you see that the original idea, if we would start somewhere arbitrarily and artificially, and so one guy somewhere says, I'm going to write a book on how to lose weight. And if that was something I could do like this and say, there it is, there's the guy who wrote it. And he writes the book, and the book says, guaranteed how to lose weight. Guaranteed. And it systematically does not complete, does not reach completion. That is, put crudely, most, some, most, much, maybe all of those who read it do not lose weight. But do they get up in arms? Do they storm the man like he is a living example, his own version of the Bastille? Do they burn him to the ground? No! In fact, he'll come out next year, doubly guaranteed how to lose weight, this time for sure, in the same people who got to buy his new book, right? So from that view, you can say the thing failed, did not reach completion. But it is now, it carried with it, what I was trying to refocus your attention, it carried with it energy, that is ideas, information that was supportive of it because it got other doctors writing books once they saw it was successful. It got people who got on the shows and not only had critics on the shows, for this doctor's new book who said it won't work. We've read it and it's dangerous. And I said, well, wait a minute. We also have another guest from another institute, and he says, well, I have read the book, and we have tested out, we have examined the diets and the plans, and we say that it is a good plan. It is produced, along with itself, supporting energy, supporting information, supporting ideas. It produced, carried with it, conflicting. That is, as soon as the first guy that I did this for, that he wrote the first diet book, it also produced, it carried with it, conflicting energy, conflicting information. That is, as soon as the book came out, somebody said, I read that book, and that's dangerous. It won't work. It's a bad idea. It did that. But also that which was irrelevant. When the first book came out, how did somebody up in the clothing district in New York and Manhattan think that this one guy, somebody said, hey, our business is in for some new times because, you know, one partner tells another one, something is really coming up soon, I'm not sure when, but soon in the clothing trade, in the garment, and the rag business is coming up a change. His partner says, why do you say that? There's a guy that just wrote a book on diets. His partner said, what the hell's that got to do with us? You'll see, you'll see. That's irrelevant to us. Get back to work. It's not irrelevant. Since it's the last taping of the week, how about change the subject and conclude with another oldie, since I brought the oldie of the public success of systems are based upon their failure, since I brought up the old one and then redefined it for you. Let me bring up another old one. It's a golden oldie because I know some of you used to like this. You remember the one that went like this? I believe it was F or, yeah, F. It goes like this. All secondary problems, I'm redefining it a little bit, all secondary problems are caused by someone attempting to help. When I originally gave it to you, I just said all problems are caused by someone attempting to help. But it's really all secondary problems because people attempting to help cannot cause primary problems. People can't cause primary problems. If they could do that, then they could create. So it's really all secondary problems are caused by somebody trying to help. But I wanted to not only bring it up, to leave on a high note, yeah, it was F. But it's to mention something a little seemingly more practical perhaps to some of you newer people here at the end of the week. Since all problems are caused by someone attempting to help, I would suggest that a real explorer could find it advantageous to say to his own brain, or if you want to sort of keep your distance, to your brother's brain. You remember that? But he would say to his own brain, his own ordinary brain, he'd say, hey, thanks, but, you know, don't help. Let me reinforce, that is a law. That is, that all secondary problems are caused by someone trying to help. Always. No matter what. That you look at something in reverse, something that you consider historically disruptive, if not cataclysmic. And if you go backwards, though, it was somebody or somebodies originally trying to help. Now, it may be from the apparent victim, some group of people. They might say, well, it didn't help us. You know, if it ended up in wars, let's say, the vanquished may say, well, wait a minute, you can't say that, you know, somebody's trying to help. But whoever trounced them somewhere was trying to help some group. There's always, what ends up being secondary problems was always can be traced in what appears to be the linear world to someone somewhere was attempting to help. But not consider all this internally, as always. All individual drives and thoughts about change from another view, if you need to see it, are absolutely doomed to an unrecognized sliding to failure, that is, systematic lack of completion, due to the very fact that you, in your own brain, life is making you say, well, I want to help. I want to help myself. And I believe, based upon the noise and the size of my liver, I think that, and based upon my age now, I think that it's time for me to quit drinking. I want to help myself. It will cause somebody somewhere problems. It will, if you were keen of eye, it will cause the man problems. Let's assume he does quit drinking. He attempted, his brain said, we ought to quit drinking. And it says that for a long period of time. And finally he does. It will end up, if you can see in a certain way, that there will be additional, different, secondary problems will arise from this attempt at someone originally to be of help. If you understand that, having nothing to do with you making rightful actions to encourage your own health, such as giving up drinking if you were drinking as a rule, but other than that, that's why I said that once you understand this, it's a very practical matter when your brain says such as that. You say, and it's attempting to help. You're not nuts. It's simply attempting to help. I'm telling you, as always, that every historical figure, every relative you ever had, every parent you ever had, all problems are caused by someone originally trying to help. I'm serious. So your brain is no different. It's trying to help. But I already told you the rule. I just put it the way I put it, remember, is all problems are caused by somebody trying to help. I'm letting you infer then that all help, some help, most help is going to lead to you know what. I just don't want to say it that way. So, I'm suggesting to you that a more astute person might be well within his rights and lefts to say to his brain, hey, thanks, but don't help. Adios. This epilogue can be seen by everyone in the other cities, but I just wanted to make that the end of the public tape. So everyone who's sitting there tonight can watch this, the epilogue, all right? Okay. And the epilogue is this, that there are people in the other cities getting this on tape right now. There's been attending the meetings for months, some of you many, many, many months. I've never met you. Some of you I've heard from. Some of you I have not. And some of you sitting there, this may be your first night. You could have been here a few weeks. But anybody who's there is welcome to this. That I personally, since I don't ever say this, am pleased that anybody ever finds apparently what they were searching for, if this is it. And I want you to know that you are welcome, because I have never ever encouraged anyone, and so why not? It's not going to cost them more. Consider yourself encouraged. Consider yourself welcomed here, if this is what you're looking for. And to you old, original people who were there when I first started in the other cities, who have been there from the beginning, you too can consider yourself encouraged and welcome, all right? Did you hear me? if you're there for the first time, 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 months, consider that I'm encouraging you. If you've been there over some length of time and you're a regular one attending the tapings, then your name is on a list somewhere, and so I know you're there, but I am being encouraging. If this is what you're looking for, then consider yourself encouraged. I've never done it before. I never told anybody that I encouraged them. But if you've already decided that this is what you're looking for, then consider yourself encouraged, consider yourself welcomed, and consider that you either got a shrug or a hug. All right, you got a hug, if this is what you were looking for. So be encouraged.